In this episode, we're talking about some early season planting and things that we're always going to grow in our garden. Welcome back. I'm Josh, and today we're going to talk about some early planting ideas and the crops that we will always plant in our garden. It's January, we got snow, I got the fire pit going. Let's go over, sit down, and talk about the crops that will always make an appearance in the Better Terra garden. Now that we're back over here by the fire, warming our hands a bit, it's a little bit chilly today. It's not super cold. We got a heavy wet snow last night. But we've been thinking in the past few days about this next season garden and what we're planning to grow. I've got a little series of videos that I'm thinking about here. One is what we'll probably won't grow in this small garden again, and why. Look out for that video. I'll post a link in the description. This video is going to focus on the crops that we will always grow here in our garden and some of the reasoning behind it. So when we're planting, the first thing that we think about is tomatoes. Every single year, no matter what, we're growing tomatoes. We're going to try different varieties, and we're going to grow some of the ones that we know produce really, really well. Tomatoes for us are a garden staple. We use them in canning and preserving and putting stuff away for sometimes up to 2 or 3 years down the road. So last year our tomato focus was on sauces. We used a whole lot of our tomatoes to make sauces, things that are sauce based like chili base, pizza sauce. We made some tomato soup, worked out really well. We got a great yield out of that. Season before that we focused on whole and diced tomatoes, and the season before that our focus was salsa. That was 3 years ago. And this year, we're back around to focusing on salsa. So we have 3 or 4 quarts left, and times are starting to get lean. So we can't wait for tomatoes and peppers and onions and all the things that go into our salsa to be ripe in the garden so we can get that delicious homemade salsa. Salsa for me is one of the best rewards from the garden. The next thing is okra, because we love okra and it's just always going to have a place in our garden. In my opinion, it's one of the easiest items to grow in the garden. You plant it, you let it grow, it's self-supporting. The only thing you have to do is remember to pick, because it'll go from 0 to 60 overnight. You'll go from like, oh, that one could maybe wait, to, wow, that's way too big.
That's what she said.
With okra, you can eat it in so many ways. You can pickle it, fry it,
Boil it, broil it, bake it, saute it,
grill it, dice it, roast it. You can put it in soups, stews, gumbo. You can put it in salads.
gumbo, pan fried, deep fried, stir fried.
It can go in casseroles.
That's about it.
So many things. The next item that'll always make an appearance is garlic, because, well, garlic goes in everything. We use garlic in almost every recipe that we make. In fact, garlic is already in the garden. It's in the last bed. It's covered with straw. It's been in since the 1st or 2nd week of November. We'll look to harvest that usually beginning part of June here in our area. The next crop that'll always make an appearance in some shape or form is peppers. Depending on the year, this is another crop that will rotate. Sometimes we'll focus on more hot peppers when we're making hot sauces and stuff like that. And the other years, like this year we're concentrating on salsa, will be more of the sweeter variety of peppers. So we're going to put in several varieties of bell pepper, and then a few varieties of the hot pepper that go well in salsa. But peppers will always have some sort of appearance in the garden because it's one of those very diverse crops. Some varieties of peppers we probably won't touch but once every 5 years, like banana peppers. One banana pepper plant that's successful can give you a tremendous amount of peppers and you won't know what to do with them. 3 years ago we made pickled sweet peppers and rings for sandwiches and things like that. We still have a ton in the canning cupboard. So some pepper varieties give you a lot. You can do them every few years. Another favorite of ours is eggplant. It's fairly easy to grow. You don't get an overabundance. For us, 2 to 3 plants gives us just enough to keep us supplied through the summer. And there's so many, like okra, there's so many dishes that can come out of eggplant. So eggplant for us, we like a couple of different varieties. We'll always have some sort of showing in our garden. Another rotational crop for us is cucumbers. We'll always have some amount of cucumbers. In a year where we're focusing on putting away pickles, the whole trellis will probably be full of cucumber varieties just for focusing on pickling. And in the years where we're not focusing on pickles, we're still going to have a cucumber or two on the trellis to have fresh cucumbers in our salads, or maybe even just sliced on a plate with some salt. So cucumbers, another staple for our garden. The next two things, just for me, means summer, and that's zucchini and summer squash. But these are two things that can really get out of control if you don't manage it well. A successful zucchini vine for a small household can overrun you with zucchini, and it'll drive your neighbors away because you share too many zucchinis with them also. We try to put in 1 or 2 vines of each squash and zucchini every season. I've even started a second round of seed starters about 6 weeks after the first round. So as we get later in the summer and those first vines are starting to get a little bit big and rambunctious and taking over a large part of the garden, I'll go to transplant in that second round, so then we'll go back to getting the younger, more tender squash and zucchini, and they stretch farther into the early fall season. Another thing about zucchini and squash, for us, we've been battling every single year with pests, mainly vine borers and squash bugs. Last year, I didn't get my prevention out soon enough, and we lost all of our zucchini and squash to vine borers. I think we harvested 2 zucchini last year before the vines died in place, and they just got pulled out. So that's an important thing to plan for also, is preventing pests early and not waiting till you see them to start reacting to them. The last thing that's a must-have in our garden or within our garden space is herbs. And that's a pretty self-explanatory thing. There's not many things better than a fresh herb from the garden. It always beats the flavor of an herb coming from the store. And what's more satisfying than walking out on your deck and trimming a fresh herb, going inside and dropping it right into the thing that you're making? That is a fantastic feeling for me. When you grow them on a deck area, on a railing, or even in the house, they look great and they have a fantastic smell. Basil, rosemary, thyme put out a great smell just in the area where they're being planted. So herbs always showing up in some shape or form, whether it's in the garden, in a planter, in the greenhouse, anywhere, we're gonna grow some herbs. I'm gonna move on to a couple of things that we'll always have in the garden if space allows. So if it comes down to like, oh, we don't really have the space for this, but we would really like to do this thing this year, these will be the first things to go on the chopping block. And the first is onions. We love growing onions. We've had really great success with growing onions here in the garden. But if it comes down to space, we'll forego onions. This year, I hope to be able to put in some late harvest variety onions so they can coincide with salsa making. I'm already planning for this space. So this year they're definitely going in the garden, but next year if we're gonna put something else in and we don't have the space for onions, then we probably won't do it. Onions are another cheap thing that you can get at the market. The next maybe item, if we have space, is tomatillos. Last year was the first year for tomatillos and we loved them, but they took up some space. Even though we had them in containers, you can still see the black and the tan container there with the dead tomatillos in there. We started them here on the patio, but the heat was a little too much for them. So I moved them in the garden, just sat them in the garden where the spinach and the beets were from the spring garden. So effectively, they took up the same amount of space in the garden if they were planted. Maybe if I can find a different container strategy and a place for them to go where they are a little bit more happy, we'll do tomatillos again. But if it comes to space, tomatillos, great summertime dish. There's not many ways to preserve them for the winter months other than salsa verde, which we have a bunch stored away. So tomatillos we love, but if space is contention, it'll go away. Another couple things that are quite rotational for us that we might do only every 2 to 3 years. The first one's green beans. We love green beans, but we found that we're able to focus on them for 1 year, to have enough put away for 2 years. So we did large crop of green beans 2 years ago. We didn't do any last year. And so again, this year, we're gonna plant a whole bed of green beans. It's gonna go in place of where the garlic is now, because it'll harvest in the summer and then we'll do a late late fall crop of green beans. So we found that we can do green beans every 2 years, dedicate the space to it, and we have enough to last us that amount of time. The next thing that we found that we can do about every 3 years are beets. I don't really love beets, but Mrs. Better Terra does like beets. So like last year we put in beets, we got a great harvest, canned those and put them away. She's been eating on them for the whole year, and there's still a lot left. So I think that's something that we're gonna be able to do at least every 3 years. Canned properly, they'll easily last that long. Those are the things that will always make an appearance in some shape or form in our garden here, our small space garden. Your needs and your wants are going to be different, but whenever you start planning for your garden, consider these ideas. What are the items that you eat a lot? What are the items that you enjoy the most? What are the items that you can grow in a small space for a high yield? Those things that we talked about now are the things for our garden that we especially love. Now there's things that we have grown in the garden and will grow in the garden that aren't on the never grow again list or will always grow again. But they happen on occasion. Sometimes we put in peas. Sometimes we put in spinach. It all depends on how we feel for that year and if we want it fresh in the time that it's harvested. We like to focus on things that we can preserve through canning or freezing or dehydrate and put away for at least 1 year in the future. I hope some of these ideas and methods will help you in your own garden planning. If you liked them, click that like button. If you have other ideas, please leave us a comment below. We love getting the comments and responding to them. This is the beginning of 2023. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Just click that subscribe button right under the video. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss the episodes we have coming out, click the bell icon to get notifications when we post something new. We're excited for 2023, and as you can see, we're starting to plan early. So come on back next time as we keep on working toward a better Terra, one must-have crop at a time.